Welcome to everyone. This is the first recording we have of the Jewish series that we're going to be doing with Entheos Society. So why don't we start? Go ahead. Why don't we start with you, Mr. Summers? And then,
sure.
And then we'll go to Chris Shaw, and then we'll go to Dr. Jeremy Weiss.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for convening this gathering. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share this panel with some wonderful thinkers and movers and shakers in this space. So my name is Benny Summers. I'll post a little thing in the chat about my organization, but I'm the current rabbinic intern for an organization called Shefa Jewish Psychedelic Support. We are a nonprofit 501c3 based in California. I have been studying at the Rabbinical School of Hebrew College in the Boston area since 2019, and I've been serving as the rabbinic intern for the last almost year now, and will continue to do so moving forward, at least for another year. Though I would love to be working with something like Shefa, full time after my ordination. That would be my needle in the haystack. But there's a lot of other things that call my attention also in my pursuit of rabbinic ordination. I live in the Boston area. I am someone who feels very strongly that the coming age of psychedelic decriminalization and integration into mainstream society warrants a serious and holistic approach from Jewish organizations in order to best attend to what I perceive to be the tidal wave of serious need that is approaching as a result of what people have gone through during the pandemic, and just like spiritual disillusionment and disenchantment that is one of the hallmarks I see of sort of postmodern, late capitalistic reality that many people exist in, particularly in the Jewish world. And for me, I came to this work after years of getting very excited and interested in the work around Jewish mindfulness and sort of integrating mindfulness practice and orientations in Jewish context. And it was during that time of growth and deepening in my own practice and my engagement with different thinkers within and outside of the Jewish world connected to contemplative practices that I began to seriously engage with sensory deprivation tanks and floating, and became very attuned to that modality for deepening my own spiritual practice. And as a result of my engagement with that, I became aware of the research around alternate states of consciousness in general. And from then on, I just went on a path of learning and deepening and engagement and around alternate states of consciousness, and really believe that the Judaism that I want to be a part of in the 21st century is one where there is a space for considered and responsible use of entheogenic compounds, for building and strengthening community bonds, for deepening spiritual experiences and practices, and for exploring realms of consciousness for the sake of healing and transformation on a micro and also on a macro level. So that's what I want to work towards. And my work with Shefa is just part of that, hopefully lifelong pursuit. So that's what I'll say for now.
Great, thank you. And sorry, one more second. Do you mind, for those who don't understand what Shefa is doing and what they've done thus far, just to kind of do a brief synopsis about it before we move to Chris?
Totally. So Shefa Jewish Psychedelic Support. Right now, we are offering integration circles on Zoom twice a month for people to process and work with the content that has emerged, either in the midst of an expanded state of awareness, or whether maybe they're preparing for an expanded state. At any point along that continuum, we want to sort of offer a sacred Jewish container for people to work through integration. And we really believe that that's some of the holiest work that's available right now to us, with all the sort of legal things that are sort of also at play. We really believe that we can immediately attend to integration services. So that's what we're offering, and are also starting to generate some content that is educational, that is designed to be experienced in in combination with events happening in Jewish calendar moments. We just came out with a Haggadah companion for Pesach. We have a Hanukkah companion for that holiday, and hopefully as we continue to work and do the things we want to be doing, it's a lot of education, community building, harm reduction work, training literacy for Jewish leaders in different spaces. And so a lot of integration services, a lot of holiday stuff, and much more to come.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Chris, take it away.
Cool. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Shaw. I have nothing planned to say, so we'll see what happens. But so I grew up in a Jewish household, primarily culturally. I didn't get bar mitzvahed. My siblings, some of them did, but it was culturally important to be to celebrate Jewish holidays and so on. And then by the time I was 13, my mom thought it was a good idea. I'll reserve any judgment, except to say I will not be replicating this parent style, to do mushrooms with me. We had already smoked marijuana together, so mushrooms, she thought it was a laughing drug, so she saw no harm in it. The effect on me was I wasn't particularly laughing all the time, but it did impact my experience of reality, or at least my historical, habitual experience of so-called objective reality. So that was kind of the first puncture. By the time I was 18 or 19, I became much more interested. I'm not exactly sure how in Ohio, but I became much more interested in Eastern traditions, Hinduism and Buddhism in particular. By the time I was 21, I was seeing the Grateful Dead regularly, which was its own kind of exploration playground, if you will, for psychedelics, at least for me. As Ram Dass said about the Grateful Dead, they are the last sacramental church in the United States. So there was a lot of sacramental experiences there. And I became more and more interested in Buddhism, and ultimately met my teacher now, Dzogchen Punlap Rinpoche. I met him when I was like 23 or 4. And I was reading exhaustively, Ram Dass, Thich Nhat Hanh, D.T. Suzuki, Alan Watts, the list goes on, doesn't much matter. But in any event, there's not a lot of Jews who are Buddhist particularly, but there are a lot of Buddhists who are Jewish in America. I think it's true that about 25 to 33% of Buddhists in America are Jewish. And ironically, my teacher on May 6th is actually giving a talk on psychedelics and the nature of mind. The pure, luminous nature of mind, basically the sky free of the clouds, the radiant sun and sky free of the passing clouds, is the nature of mind from a Buddhist perspective. So in any event, these kind of things all just kind of came together for me. My experience with hallucinogens or medicine, they weren't always positive. Mostly they were, but sometimes they were unpleasant. And that taught me a lot about how clinging to concepts causes suffering. And there were also experiences where I did briefly experience radiant, luminous, no self, no one's home. The name Chris Shaw doesn't mean a thing. Vast awareness and vast love and compassion. And those glimpses got me very interested in to see how I can replicate that or have that experience sustained. I didn't ultimately think that I could eat or ingest medicines every day. So I ultimately did start a meditation practice to try to have those experiences, to skillfully relate with the relative mind, thoughts, emotions, and habits, which I realized were blocking my experience of nature of mind, and also to tap into these experiences of nature of mind. And I found meditation for me personally to be a very good, avenue for that. Not to push, people do what they do, but I will say, I'm a Tibetan Buddhist because my teacher is a Tibetan Buddhist. If he had been a Hindu, I'd be a Hindu. If he had been Jewish, I'd be Jewish. And whatever, I met him. He blew my mind in ways that I'll spare you the details of, but pretty powerful and like beyond concept. And I wanted to follow his lead. But in any event, I appreciate being here, and I hope that in terms of the medicine, I will say for me that it was definitely a doorway. It definitely got me very curious, and I hope that I don't think everyone should necessarily do medicine or shouldn't. I'm agnostic on that, but I sincerely hope that when people do it, they have even just a tenth of the experience I had, because I'm not the only one to say that ultimately were extremely changing, maybe life challenging, I almost said, but I mean to say life changing. And, I have a deep amount of gratitude for the impact they've had on my life personally. And hopefully it's a benefit to those around me as well. So I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jeremy, you're next.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jeremy Weiss, and I'm representing the Temple of Miriam the Prophetess. I was a practicing physician for a very long time with an interest in Jewish folk magic. And I have pursued those ends. I'm not a real explorer, psychonaut, or explorer of entheogens per se, but I am a gentleman who looks at Judaism with a different eye, and have started my own sect of Judaism, which is a non-sacerdotal sect. I believe that we are all spiritual equals, and therefore we are all empowered to do whatever we need to do without the help of clergy of any type. And so I have become matured into, I would say, a Jewish mystic. And later on this evening, we will get a chance to watch a presentation that I wrote on incense in the Jewish tradition and the magic of incense in the Jewish tradition.
Wonderful, thank you. Aaron, do you mind going next? And then Riche Groner, can you go last?
Not at all. Shavua Tov, everyone. My name is Aaron Romano. I happen to be Jeremy's cousin. That's my claim to fame. I'm also an attorney, and I recently launched a challenge to cannabis prohibition in the Connecticut state court system. And in doing so, it was based on the racially prejudicial origins of the laws. And in doing so with the research, one of the things I tried to do is establish that cannabis had not been regulated up to 1920. That's when legislation was passed. So I looked to historical evidence that it was not regulated and it was used commonly. And one of the things I discovered was that cannabis was part of the anointing oil in the temple. So I would use that as part of my presentation and my argument to show that even within the Judeo-Christian context, that cannabis was acceptable, was unregulated, and it was used in this oil. From there, what was interesting is the journey expanded to other psychedelics, because YouTube does a lot of things. When you start looking at different videos, they start sending you things that you need. And of course, Terrence McKenna started coming up on my feed. And I had the rare opportunity to engage in psilocybin therapy session, which was an amazing opportunity for myself. It was life transforming, and I plan on litigating a challenge to psilocybin prohibition within the coming year in Connecticut, and hopefully that will assist other lawyers in other jurisdictions to go ahead and challenge psilocybin prohibition.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks.
I need you to remind me the question because I got in a little late. I'm sorry.
Just tell us why you're in the psychedelic space and why this movement is calling you and your heart and, who you are.
Sure. My name is Risha. My first time meeting most of you, so nice to be here. And thank you, Leonora, for organizing this. I rarely tell my personal story in this arena. I don't know if I ever have before. So this is a first. But I'm a rabbinical student, and I am a teacher of embodied ecstatic Jewish mysticism, for lack of a better category. And I've been on a very long spiritual journey that has really taken me, from, I grew up Hasidic Orthodox Judaism, which has a lot of technologies of ecstatic embodiments within it, but I wasn't really quite sure how to access a lot of it through my journey growing up. And, I sort of had a lot of different phases of my own experience, experiencing life as a woman in a more conservative Jewish community. And my personal sort of experience led me from a corporate life of high anxiety, occasional depression, and alcohol, pretty much dependence, through use of cannabis, and then eventually grandma medicine, ayahuasca, was really the catalyst for bringing about a whole new healing process that has, it took me off alcohol. It brought me, helped me through healing physically, eating disorders, anxiety, depression. And then beyond that, it gave me a place to start working through my experience in Jewish community in terms of understanding my role as a teacher, my role as now I'm becoming a rabbi. Never would have happened. I have to say, never would have happened without the medicine showing me the way. And also coming into an understanding of these tools, these technologies that I grew up with, that I love, singing, dancing, ritual, ceremony, space, how to bring them, revive them, make them accessible, bring them into spaces, both within Jewish communities and outside, like in more spiritual communities where people have a connection to their Jewish ancestry and don't quite know how to access it. So I really see, I'm sort of, my role with psychedelics is in a lot of different ways, because I work sometimes with people sort of one-on-one to talk to them about their experiences before or after. And then sometimes I support in more ceremonial spaces around actually interweaving Jewish ritual into the experience, Jewish prayers, Jewish songs. And I really think that we're facing uncharted territory as we figure out how do we remember our really ancient tradition of ecstatic, embodied, mystical experience, and also how do we undo a lot of that trauma and find our own pathways. So I'm really honored to be doing this work, and I'm a humble servant of the medicine, which means I don't often know what I'm going to be doing next. But I get called, I worked in the cannabis industry on Wall Street. I've done copywriting for business and psychedelics, blogs before. And sometimes I end up talking to people on a platform like this. So wherever I go next, I don't know, but I'm grateful to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question I kind of wanted to put to the group, and you can just kind of jump in, or we can go through periodically. My sense is that within the Jewish community, like when I went to my old synagogue, they weren't that interested in talking about psychedelics. And I felt frustrated because I felt like I could connect the dots. So sometimes I think we think everyone might think like us, and we might assume that everyone else could draw the parallels. But I would look at the social justice movement of my synagogue and I would think, why can't they make the connection? You know, that the racist drug war is part of the liberation of psychedelics. You know what I mean? Like that it's connected, and that there are tools afoot for helping people really relieve suffering and trauma. And certainly the Jewish community knows about suffering and trauma, but also connects with wanting to serve those who are suffering and experiencing trauma. So I saw so much good social justice stuff going on in my local synagogue, and I felt really frustrated that these bright, intelligent, academically oriented Jews that I loved and respected weren't making this connection that I was making in terms of doing plant medicine. And my friend Ari, he helped me with Decrim Nature Seattle, and he was doing work in the Orthodox community. And I felt like I kept pressuring him, like, come on out of the closet and, you know, do bigger stuff, or, you know, more obvious work in this field, because you too know how impactful these medicines can be. And yet I struggled because I felt like I was beating my head against a wall in terms of my local Jewish community. And I attended the Jewish Entheogenic Summit last summer. And so, I mean, it's definitely growing. I mean, you see this growing within the Jewish community, and I want to emphasize that those of us who didn't grow up practicing the religion that the community and the tribe itself, I feel like matters, and I want to see representation here for our little mini summit from all aspects of the Jewish community, and those can be people that are practicing Buddhism. You know, for me, it's very inclusive. So I want to emphasize that everyone has a space here in terms of the conversation. And coming from Jewish communities or Jewish families and Jewish roots, and that I don't think it ever leaves us. So I'm just putting it out to the group, like the panelists, where do you as individuals feel like there's headway that you're making within maybe more rigid conservative Jewish communities, or with folks who may not be receptive to this? And how do you find yourself doing a mitzvah in terms of, you know, you may not be a practicing Jew in terms of going to synagogue, but you may be doing lots of social justice work, including plant medicine social justice work. So I know it's a very large question, but Benny, why don't we start with you and kind of go through the same, unless someone doesn't want to give a response. Okay, take it away.
That is a big question. Well, here's what I feel like I can say in this moment. In my experience, which is obviously limited to my personal sphere, it's not necessarily that Jewish community or Jews are anathema to what the psychedelic experience can bring about. I think there is quite a bit of learned behaviors that are a result of the war on drugs, which have seeped into communal consciousness, that have become well-worn grooves of initial response. You know, you hear about drugs, you just say no, kind of thing, right? And that takes time to thaw and shift. And I think a lot of patience. I've tried to practice a lot of patience and compassion for where people are at, and try to meet people where they are. And for me, it's not about trying to effectively communicate why this is important, but sort of lean a bit closer in with people and ask, like, you know, what really matters to you about your connection to the Jewish path? Like, where does it help you come more alive? And then to see in their responses an opportunity to offer some information or some perspective coming from this particular space of expanded states of awareness. I was reading, there's a wonderful collection of essays that came out of a conference in 1995 at the Chicago Theological Seminary called Psychoactive Sacramentals. And I was reading it today as part of my Shabbat reading. And, you know, what I was getting from some of the, and this is from back in the 90s, but what I was getting from some of these writers is that we want to be asking good questions. We want to encourage people to ask better questions than maybe they were trained to ask when it comes to psychedelics, as opposed to like, does it fry your brain, or will it get my kids hooked on drugs? Asking other questions like, was it helpful? Or how do you feel now? Or, you know, was there healing involved? Like these kinds of more open-ended invitational questions, as opposed to these like more binary yes, no, sort of like fear-based questioning. So I think for me, when it comes to engaging with community of all stripes, it's just about being open and receptive to where people are at and trying to engender the kind of conversation that is launched from, you know, asking certain questions that allow people to be curious and sometimes vulnerable even, and brave in talking about things that they do or don't necessarily understand. So there's that, and that's what's coming up for me right now. So I'll leave it there, I guess, for now.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a lot to offer on this one. I'm not even 100% sure exactly what the question is, but let me just say, in general, this is me, I'm just talking for myself. I don't really spend a lot of time trying to change people's minds. You know, I spend a lot of time trying to, you know, I think I've said this to you before actually, but like one of my favorite religious quotes, is do not seek the truth, only cease to cherish opinions. And any idea I have that other people should be different, in my mind, for me, is aggression and delusion, because that's not where they're at. And by the way, I don't even know if what I think is right anyway, right? I mean, medicine is good for some people, not for everybody. Meditation is good for some people, not for everybody, you know? So I just don't think about things from this is me really, but from a political perspective. Like I got a short life, at least in this costume. And I want to do whatever I can to relax. And maybe the most radical political statement I can make is relax. Relax my fixation on good, bad, right, wrong, I, other, you should be different, blah, blah, blah. Like we've been playing that game for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So yeah, that's all.
Wow. Okay. Jeremy, do you feel like weighing in? You're muted.
Wait, which Jeremy? Me, Jeremy, or Dr. Weiss?
Dr. Weiss, you're not a panelist.
I don't mind weighing in. Can you restate the question?
It has to do with feeling like the general Jewish community may not be receptive to psychedelics. And so maybe you could relate from being kind of on the fringe in terms of going off and creating your own sect of Judaism. But what Chris was responding with was, well, you're coming at any person and you're saying you need to be different, you need to change, that you're stuck or you're not growing. And so with that comes judgment. Those were some of his reflections.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's all true, and everybody approaches their thing whatever their thing is, Judaism, a hobby, their belief in medicine, their belief in physics, politics, whatever. Everybody has their own perspective, and you're gonna bump up against people with different opinions, and I just simply respect other people's opinions, and I practice my own brand of Judaism. That's it. I mean, they can do what they want to do, and we get into interesting discussions, and that's one of the things that I love about Judaism so much, is that it has a very, very long, extensive tradition of of discussion and thoughtful discussions at that. And so we have at least an advantage culturally in that we have that, and we have a diversity of opinions. All Jews don't think alike. Some are Republicans, some are Democrats, some might be for the labor movement, some might be against the labor movement. I mean, there's a diversity. I mean, there are Chinese Jews and Black Jews and all sorts of flavors. And so there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, drugs are outlawed and forbidden, and just like there are a lot of Jews that say witchcraft or folk magic is forbidden. I come across that all the time, and then we just have a discussion and we say, really, like what makes you think that? And let's talk about that, and let's talk about the Ketoret and what was actually in the Ketoret and what is in incense, and the fact that Jews do have a tradition of ecstatic dance and ecstatic ritual and all sorts of mystical methods to communicate with Magids and which are spirit guides, as well as Ibers, and seek beneficent possession. So all, we talk about that. I talk about that all the time. In fact, an example that I often cite is that people say, something about necromancy, that Jews practice necromancy. And then they turn to me and they say, what? Necromancy? That's forbidden! Absolutely not! And I say, oh, really? Well, so Passover's coming, you leaving the door open for the spirit of Elijah? That's an act of necromancy. Sukkot's coming. Are you not calling upon the ghosts of your ancestors in the Ushpizin ritual to come sit with you in the sukkah? That's an act of necromancy. It's not figurative. Isaac Luria was doing something to actually bring about those spirits. So I just engage with people when they have a different opinion. If I desire, if they desire, if they have an open mind, if I have an open mind, we all learn. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't care.
Got it. Thank you. Aaron?
Yes. So I guess in terms of the question, I don't know if it presupposes that psychedelics, this is a conversation that we need to have as Jews with other Jews, as opposed to just the general public. I know that, so let's just, what I'd like to do is just answer the question from that framework. I had to have these kinds of conversations about cannabis, and because basically when I was doing the challenge, the legal challenge, it's always good to hear what other people's perspectives are on the matter to tighten up your argument. And I would have these discussions in shul. I go to an Orthodox synagogue, and I had to actually prove to our rabbi that cannabis was used in the oil, and so he then couldn't really dispute that. And ultimately, it's really funny. This past week, I traveled. I was doing some traveling. I went to Philadelphia, and I stopped off at one of his colleagues and pick up a mezuzah. And one of his colleagues gave me an infused muffin. This is a rabbi gave me an infused muffin, which he said he uses for the yeshiva bachers to help them come in and learn with him. He gives them cannabis infused muffins, and that muffin was so strong. So they really hopped on board once it became legal. I think there is a concern within the Jewish community because halacha does say that you have to abide by the laws in the country that you live. And if psychedelics are illegal, it really hampers a logical discussion about it, because observant Jews, at the very least, are going to approach it from the standpoint of following the laws in the country that you live in. What I have done within my community, because I believe that it can enhance one's spiritual experience and one's connection with Hashem. So, and those are some of the experiences that I felt with larger doses. And there was one moment in particular, one moment in time where I was called to make an aliyah. And as I was standing there in front of the Sefer Torah, I felt the connection to all my ancestors and to all my progeny who would be making this blessing in front of the Torah. And I hadn't felt that before. And I think it was really because I was in that frame of mind where I was open to that and thinking beyond just the self, beyond just where I was. So what I try and do, at least among friends who are Jewish, is speak to them about those experiences, as Jeremy had spoke about. And I'm not there to win them over, but just to talk about it. And I think if they're curious, they go and they'll ask more questions. If not, that's fine too. One of the things that came up in this week's Parsha, when we read it this morning, is called Achrei Mot, and it's after the death. Now, the Parsha begins with after the death of Aaron's sons. That's what it's referring to. But then the Parsha goes on to talk about other laws, other dinim that we're supposed to follow. So the question I gave the group in this morning in shul was, why does the Parsha start off with Achrei Mot, referring to the death of Aaron's sons, and then go into laws that are unrelated to that? And so we had a nice discussion about that. But what one of the members brought up, and this is, I think, an important point for us to all consider when we're thinking about the use of plant medicine in concert with religious practice, is Aaron's sons, the way the Torah describes the story, is they have drunk wine, and they went to the Beit HaMikdash, and then they made their own Ketoret offering, their own incense offering. And Hashem then goes and strikes them down, and they die. And so that's often interpreted within rabbinical circles as you should not be praying while under the influence of any intoxicant. So I think that is going to be a very challenging argument to get past, because we have this example in the Torah that's very clear, and that interpretation is widely accepted. So I would just throw that back to everyone in the group.
I disagree.
Okay, well, good.
Because I will
throw that back to the group.
I disagree, because I will tell you that one of the major ingredients in the Ketoret, of course, is myrrh as well as frankincense, and both of those have opioid-like qualities.
Okay.
So
now, and on the contrast, the Ketoret are not being consumed. So the Ketoret are being burned. But they're not being consumed, as opposed to, let's say, the first time we hear about alcohol is with Noah. he grows the vines,
Right.
he grows grapes, he gets
Yes.
drunk, and then what happens is, one of his sons comes in, sees him unclothed, and it's a big scandal for him, for Noach, because he's drinking. So
Right, but
throughout the Torah,
abstinence from alcohol is a sin that requires an offering to the temple each year if you abstain from alcohol. So, and alcohol is essential to nearly every Jewish magico religious tradition, practice. So, I mean, you're praying during Pesach. You're having a prayer during Pesach. You are praying. There is a prayer for wine. So how can you have a prayer for wine and then say that praying while drinking wine is not allowed, or everything thereafter?
well, I don't think that's I don't think that's how the rabbis interpret death of Aaron's sons. And I appreciate your insight, and that's why you have your own sect. But what I'm talking
right, but I don't understand that ruling.
well, okay, well that's fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
think his Aaron's sons were intoxicated as opposed to just drinking wine, and we all know that wine does have a role in ritual here, in Shabbat, and then in the Kiddush for Shabbat day. So I just want to throw that out to everyone else. I think one of the issues is the stigma against using plant medicine, and perhaps in coinciding that use of the plant medicine with worship. And I think getting around that, I just throw that out to everyone else. How do you feel about it? I mean, from a personal standpoint, I don't see.
That's how you get around it. It is essential to innumerable magico-religious rites in Judaism. The imbibement of wine. It's a it's there you go.
Right, but again, while it's using it, it's not using it to the point of intoxication. I don't think.
Well,
Torah,
wait a minute. The point of intoxication.
I don't think anywhere in the Torah. If you could just let me finish. Yeah, I don't think anywhere in the Torah it says that someone should be intoxicated and then go ahead and worship. But that's all I wanted to say. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to respond to that question.
All right, well, wait a minute. I'm still going to go after that, which is to say that everybody has their own different tolerance level by nature. And that has to do with their alcohol dehydrogenase levels, and that's genetic. And my friend who's Jewish, and when she does Pesach and she's on the fourth cup of wine, she is like blitzed out of her mind. And it's mandatory that she drink the fourth cup of wine. So
I don't think that's the conflict. Like, from my understanding, what I'm hearing from Aaron is this piece of Torah is a really powerful Torah, this parsha of Achrimot, because it's not, look, we don't learn Jewish law from the exact thing that happened in the Torah. That's not how the system works, right? So it's a cautionary tale for us to think about what is our relationship with using substances to connect to the divine. Here is a cautionary tale of saying, if you're fully reliant on the substance and that is your whole goal, then don't do that, because there are boundaries, there are structures, there are ways. And I think there's a lot to learn from it. And I think we all have our own perspectives of, I don't think anyone's saying that there's no such thing as any intoxicants in Judaism. Sorry, Aaron, I want to let you finish.
I just wanted to add that there's actually like a Talmudic saying. I found this out at a Purim gig where it's like where the Talmud goes in between up to 4 glasses of wine. Like, I think the first one is like you're too meek. Second one, you're almost there. Third one, you're just right. And the fourth one, you're rolling around like a donkey.
Right. And then of course in Purim, it's a minchag in certain communities to get so intoxicated that you can't recognize your friends from your enemies. So
that's right.
Right.
Says that in the Talmud too.
Yes.
Exactly. That's another example. That's a great example.
Mhm.
So you could use that example in your argument to the court.
Well, not really, because that would be great, but that's alcohol. And really, I think if every Shabbat we celebrated it as if it were Purim, I think all hell would break loose, so to speak. But however, in certain communities, I think Shabbat day, the Kiddush can oftentimes look like Purim, depending on where you are. So,
All right. Well, thank you. Let's move on to our last panelist speaker, and then we'll open it up to questions.
So I was going to go a different direction, but because of the way this conversation is going, I want to just share. A few years ago, oh my God, it was like 6 years ago at this point. Okay, so the first thing I'll say is that I think we would often be surprised if we knew how widespread medicine, psychedelics, cannabis was in places we don't know, in places we can't see. So one example I have is that 6 years ago, I believe it was 6 years ago, I was teaching at Limud, which is a really awesome conference it's a pluralist Jewish conference of all kinds of teachers. And I taught a class called the Torah of Marijuana, or Is Cannabis Kosher? I was working in the cannabis industry at the time. I was just starting to spread my wings, getting back into my Jewish educator life. And I thought it would be a really fun chance for me to teach a lot about what I'd been learning about the endocannabinoid system and different ways of ingestion and different just things that a lot of people didn't know as cannabis was becoming more and more mainstream through the lens of Judaism. And I wasn't going to go into a lot of talk about, the Kanei Basem being an ingredient in the Ketoret. I really wanted to come down to the idea that it doesn't matter, did we or didn't we use medicines in the past? Obviously, if you read the Torah, if you look at any agriculture of any ancient civilization, humans have been using plants and other substances to change states forever, okay? Since the second chapter of Genesis, when we ate something that was something from a tree, we don't know what it was, that changed consciousness. So we've been doing it for a long time. And we know, again, like from our tradition, and this example from of Aaron's sons is a really important one, that there have always been parameters and rituals and containers around how we use those medicines in terms of, okay, this is before we make Kiddush on Friday nights. I'm sitting here right before I came on, I made Havdalah. So before we make Havdalah, and I don't drink alcohol, by the way. I'm drinking fabulous biodynamic grape juice from my neighbors at Kedem. But, we pour ourselves wine. We use a nice cup. I just had a candle that I should have done Havdalah on here for all of you. And we do it ritually. We do it sacramentally. And that's been the case with everything from the Ketoret, which were offered very ceremoniously, to the extent that Aaron's sons were punished because they offered the Ketoret ceremonially, but not ceremonially enough. And one of the first questions I got in that workshop that I taught was some rabbis coming to me saying, listen, it's becoming legal where I live, or it's almost legal where I live. This is 6 years ago, so now it's legal where almost everybody lives. And what are our rules going to be around it in our synagogue? Like, we have wine for Kiddush, so what's going to happen? Like, if we're, having a potluck for a Purim event, and everyone can bring a bottle of an alcohol, can they also, and I had this in my home this Purim, where somebody showed up with some edibles and some pre-rolls, and I was like, yes, you understood the assignment. I don't drink alcohol, so that was really sweet. And I sort of was just saying that I think that we have enough structures and rituals already to think about how we do that medicinally. But anyway, that's totally a sidebar. What I wanted to answer Leonora's question, because I understand that it feels frustrating when you look at people who seem like they're so progressive and so in the game in so many ways, and then in other ways they're just totally not. And you're like, seriously? Like, just come sit with me in a ceremony. Just stop drinking so much booze or taking so many pills, and and do something different. And obviously, like, we're human, so humans like to judge. It's just what we do. I've spent a lot of time thinking, if I didn't judge so much, I'd be so much less tired. But it happens. But I remember always the experience I had my first, the first time you start to go back to your family after you've been doing a lot of this deep work is always really challenging because you have all these things you want to share. And I remember spending Passover with my parents, I'm going to say 6 years ago, and getting this meditation in my inbox that said something about spiritual, I know the Hebrew word, dugmachaya, a living example. What happens when you want to show someone something? You want to tell them something, or you want to tell them rather than show them. And the example given was, you don't need to take someone to a stream and show them how to drink. They drink because the water is wet and it's cool and it's refreshing and it's delicious. You don't need to tell anybody why they should drink the water. They're just like, oh, I'm thirsty. And the natural instinct is to drink water. There's a few exceptions here and there. And that's what it's about. And I remember how clearly that shifted everything, where I had been formerly like sort of yelling at my family, like, before I grew up saying blessings over my food and my drink, but it was like a mumble, right? And suddenly I would like stop and I would like take a second and be like, wow, thank you for this water. Thank you, goddess. And then I would say things, and I would get interrupted by my grandmother or someone or my family. And I was like, can't you see what I'm doing? I'm doing the blessing. And then I was like, you can't tell them. You got to show them. And I can't say I always succeed in doing this, but I think that when it comes to medicine, you can't make anyone drink. And I've seen this too much, honestly, in a way that I can often get very passionate fighting against, where I see people who are amazing activists in this world, and all they want to do is bring it to friends. And we say, come on, come. And I can say that in 7 years, I think there's maybe one time I've ever invited anybody to a ceremony, and that was just because they asked me. I've had people who've mentioned they're interested, and I say, if it's something that, when it's time, let me know, and I'll see what I can connect you to. And that's because when it's time, and when it's time. But what we can do, any person who is engaged in psychedelic healing of any type, it doesn't have to be a medicinal, it can be doing breath work or I'm very into ecstatic dance and embodied, 5 rhythms is just a psychedelic in my opinion. Anything like that, we can actually do the work and it has an impact on the people around us. So it has an impact on our families. I always say that when we drink medicine, we're also drinking for everybody who's not there. That's not a delusion of grandeur. Like, I can heal all of my ancestral line. I can heal my whole family. Don't do that. We can't. We can pray for that. We can hope for that. But what we can do is, by us internalizing, doing the work every day, bit by bit, there are people around us who notice those changes. And it can take months, years, decades, but it happens slowly. And in the broader Jewish context, I think that is where the change is going to come from, because it's a critical mass moment. And as each person who is doing this work is then a part of a community, leading in a community, they start to bring that in as themselves. So I'm an intern and an education director. Sorry, noise. I work at a conservative synagogue, and conservative with a capital C. So they're not particularly conservative; they're quite progressive. And I'm sure that there are some people there who are engaged in this in their own sort of psychedelic experiences, and some have talked to me about it, and some don't even know that I'm engaged in it, so they don't talk to me about it. Because again, it's not that I'm in the closet, but it's not my main thing. I feel that in the right time, in the right way, with the right people, it comes out as a conversation, but it's not a thing. I think I've noticed now it's a lot more of a flippant conversation. I was sitting at a dinner with a bunch of Orthodox women, and one of them turned and was like, oh, I sat in an ayahuasca ceremony the other night. And the other one's like, tell us about your experience. How was it for you? And they started comparing notes. And I said, wow, 7 years ago, I would have been like, never in my dreams would I have told these women what I was really up to on my weekends. And I think that it's so incredible what's happening without us even noticing. Psychedelics are incredibly popular in the ultra-Orthodox world, incredibly. Ganja is very mainstream, like in Israel, you know, ultra-Orthodox people you'll see in all kinds of environments smoking. It's not strange. A lot of them will be working with plant medicines one-on-one. There's a lot of therapists who specialize in that world, and in different medicines, in MDMA and psilocybin. There are ceremonies that are catered specifically to ultra-Orthodox communities, both in a way where there is less of the where there's less sort of use of other sort of deities and traditions, and some that actively use Jewish traditions, both in Israel and in the States and in South America, not both, in all of those places. There's a lot more going on than we can imagine. And I think that it's one of those things where we don't actually see the impact now. So, you know, you might have somebody who goes through their personal healing journey, and they are an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who is seeing community members all the time, and suddenly they have a new sense of compassion, and they're suddenly able to deal with things differently in that community than it's ever happened before. And you can have the same thing in Reform Judaism, and I don't really understand or believe in denominations, but you can have that in any section of Judaism. You can have people who, you know, like me, part of my journey was suddenly showing up to Kabbalat Shabbat and being much more enthusiastic and more embodied and more excited about it, and that becoming infectious with everybody around you. So I think that it's easy to get like sort of despairing when we think about how much work there is to do. But just like we're in this period now of Sfirat HaOmer, where we count every day and we count up, we don't count down. We say, oh, look how many days have passed. We've done so much. And when I think about, you know, I lived in Jerusalem for 2 years, and what I saw happening was beyond my wildest dreams of what I imagined. And then I came back to Brooklyn and I saw what was happening here, and it was things growing more than I had ever imagined. And it's just going to keep growing, but also it doesn't need to grow faster than it needs to. So, you know, there's a song that I remember hearing once, you know, you just can't hurry the goddess. The process, the moment, it happens it happens in its way. And sometimes the hardest thing is for us to just let ourselves do what we have to do in front of us, and recognize that everything around is going to also happen. There's always the crazy people at the forefront, making all the noise, doing all the hard work, bashing down the walls. And I think a lot of the people here are those crazy people doing that. And, you know, the middle of the pack catches up soon, and they're like, oh, we've been doing this. What do you mean? This is so normal. And we're like, no, like, you know, I mean, I think about that a lot when I think about how important it is to include Indigenous people in the work we're doing, because they were carrying these medicines for a really long time, or people of color in the United States who were getting arrested for carrying these medicines for a really long time. There have always been people at the front, and you know, to have gratitude for that. And then wherever our place is in that journey, whether it's, you know, somebody seeing this video online and being like, wow, I'm not alone. Now I'm going to email you and learn a little bit more about what's going on, and now I have someone to talk to. Or people just knowing what else is going on, feeling a little less alone in the journey. And eventually it's just going to come together and coalesce, because there's no other way. It has to happen. We just have to like recognize that each one of us is holding another little section. And whether you're working with people one-on-one, communally, spiritually, whether you're drinking medicine with them or smoking with them, or just talking to them online, everyone's doing something to weave this magical web.
Thank you. I was very struck by a lot of what you shared there, and found myself just getting emotional, like you're talking just to me, but of course you're talking to other people too. But thank you for those.
I'm answering your question, so I'm glad
those
that resonated. And I wanted to say one more thing. Yep. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes.
Yep.
Is that so one of the things that you become obsessed with when you do medicine work, as I'm sure most of you know, is trauma. and been thinking a lot about trauma and studying a lot about trauma. And I'm taking a class right now at not at my seminary, which is the Jewish Theological Seminary, but at our neighbor across the street, the Union Theological Seminary, which are I think they're non-denominational, some form of different variety of Christian denominations, but they also have all religions there. And we're taking a class on trauma, but it's a theology class on trauma. And what struck me about it is that I'm coming in from this perspective of how do we start to incorporate embodied, old, new religious practices that can connect us to our ancestry, connect us to our heritage, and shake off trauma. So, we read My Grandmother's Hands, where Resmaa Menakem talks about how he talks about the differences with like Black bodies in America and white bodies in America, and the different things that we can do to regulate our bodies and sort of shake off a lot of that trauma. And he talks about coming together in community, singing and humming and sharing food, and how powerful that is. And I was like, oh, no brainer. Like, Jewish communities have also been doing that for a really long time. And I've often carried this image of, I see that we have, the temple of Miriam the prophetess, and Miriam the prophetess she was all about dance. And this is a Torah that I teach every year. A week ago, on the last day of Passover, when we cross the sea, and there's this dance moment, and that is actually a trauma healing method that Miriam pioneered with the women of, let's get in circles and let's dance. Let's shake it off. Let's shake it out. And I'm actually planning on presenting on that in my class this Monday, because I was trying to kind of come up with all these other things around how do we incorporate body-based trauma healing methods into contemporary congregations, because my classmates, my colleagues in the Christian denominations are not thinking about it yet, at least not from this perspective. And I thought, I've got to bring in Miriam, and I've got to talk about the dancing, the singing, the movement, and how that is something that has been like from that first trauma of Egyptian exile to today's trauma is something that is so accessible and so palpable. So anyways, I just wanted to make sure to share that with all of you. And Dr. Jeremy, I'm excited to read this piece about mysticism, Jewish dancing. I've also written a bunch of things about Miriam and the dance, so I look forward to cross-sharing all of that. And that's really my last piece. Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay, we're going to move on to questions. Some questions have been in the chat, and then in about 10 minutes, we're going to start Dr. Jeremy's presentation on entheogens and incense and Jewish culture. But so we have about 10 minutes. People have been posting stuff in the chat. If someone wants to answer something that appeals to them from the chat, or if someone wants to speak their question from the chat, some of it felt like commentary. So just go ahead and raise your hand if you want to speak, or jump in, but just be mindful that we have about 10 minutes before Dr. Weiss does his presentation. Jeremy, do you want to share your thought? Not Dr. Weiss, the other Jeremy.
Hi. Sorry about the interrupting and everything. I came here late and wasn't aware of the structure, so I want to apologize if I derailed anything or added unnecessary stuff. So a while ago, I was before like really diving deep into studying Torah. I'm playing a lot of catch up. Mainly due to the lockdown, because the saying goes that Torah will heal everything. It's the greatest tikkun that could be here. I was noticing something about with the microdosing that you definitely do interact with other entities, and there's kind of looking at the Western occultist kind of side of stuff. It's one big thing that could happen, and that I've noticed with some other friends that got really heavy into the Burning Man seed, is that they got possessed by demons or other entities. They started doing mushrooms and stuff. They're good for a little bit, and then everything just kind of starts falling down. I think some of the Hasidus reading I saw was like they were warning about it leading to idolatry, like that whole conversation earlier about using substances to achieve connectiveness with the divine, but what is the intention behind it and all that other stuff. And I mean, I'm trying not to fall into, so I'm just gonna stop there before like starting to repeat myself, because I can't think of the clear question. It's just I've seen it happen very, very often, and if and with putting being spiritually minded and putting that whole the whole use of psychedelics for trauma, it's do you and also hearing that it's been used in Israel with like the Haredi and all that other stuff, it's really interesting. So I'm wondering how people monitor like the whole falling towards idolatry, falling towards all the nasty sins that we learn to not go with, like especially implementing more of using psychedelics to deal with trauma that occurs and like that occurs. If that made any sense.
Yeah, Benny, do you feel like responding, or anyone else?
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate the question you're bringing. I think when thinking about how we can encourage our fellow journeyers to maintain a sense of their own personal spiritual integrity, whatever that means for them, I think a good place to start is to have a conversation maybe, or to just to emphasize that so much of this work eventually, for at least in my perspective from the Jewish persuasion, and obviously this can be from lots of other persuasions, but I just feel this in my Jewish kishkas, that it all comes back to the community, right? That like when I go away to have an experience with expanded state of awareness as mediated through a psychedelic compound, I'm not just doing it to go away, but rather to sort of withdraw and then return, and to return in some way to contribute to the community of my choosing, that I'm a part of, and to remember that whatever I encounter, whatever content emerges in the midst of an expanded state, how can I work with that content after the fact in order to contribute in some way to the community that I'm responsible and connected to. And if the community that I'm responsible and connected to is one that has a lot of discomfort and dis-ease with engaging directly with, as you call them, entities or alternative spiritual forces and personalities, then perhaps it's about orienting the integration to not so much fixating on the entities themselves, but on the information that they seem to be communicating, in terms of how to then take those lessons and take those ideas or inclinations or insights even, and apply them in some way that can coalesce with how the community that you're a part of, functions, and how can it make something better. I think a lot of my understanding of the prophetic tradition is not so much about like taking a glimpse into the distant future, but rather making cogent observations about the present, using the expanded awareness as a way of entering more deeply into the present, to then take information from that and apply it for some kind of helpful frame or practice moving forward, not just for the individual, but for what the individual is also connected to, and that web of interconnectivity that Risha was talking about. So there's definitely a lot of anxiety that I've encountered when having these conversations with people of the several Jewish persuasions about, so idolatry. My teacher, Rabbi Art Green, says that idolatry is essentially focusing on the part instead of the whole. That's really like at the center of idolatry, right? Like mistaking the part for the whole, and just remembering that we are part of a greater whole in our communities, and using that as a foundation for counteracting any sort of any propensities for moving into maybe maladaptive territory when it comes to that kind of stuff. So if that's helpful at all, that's kind of something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, no, a little bit. It was more, I guess, like, yeah, I guess it's like, it seems like it's like a case by case thing, and with the proper people there and the open space for communicating about things. It seems like it could avoid like a lot of the nasty stuff I've seen within the burner community, or like even local like super hippie-ish people, especially when involving like ayahuasca and stuff.
May I ask a clarifying question, Jeremy? If I heard your question correctly, and I'm not sure I did, so that's why I'm asking for clarification. Did you ask if there was a mechanism of a protection against opening conduits to malevolent entities? Is that what during the psychedelic experience, or in an effort to have the mystical experience? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, pretty much, because I've been a
Okay,
part of
so you don't. What you're asking is, how do I not get infected by demons or malevolent entities while prior to a psychedelic experience? Correct.
Correct.
Okay, then the answer to that would be to say Psalms 91, of course, and we've talked about this in the past, right? You'd say Psalm 91 3 times. Is certainly one mechanism. Another way of doing that would be, of course, to do your psychedelic trip after, at Rosh Chodesh, after you've celebrated and shaken off Yetzer Hara. Okay? So that way you don't fall into your selfish desire or succumb to Yetzer Hara.
Yeah, that's, I guess, one of the pieces that I was asking, and I guess Dr. Jeremy, we've talked about this in the past, and I know you're on a completely different level in terms of looking at the ritualistic stuff and everything. The other portion to that was integrating this, especially into more like lesser magical ritualistic focused sex. Do you think that it would be, I guess, the monitoring? How would the overall monitoring in a more secular kind of scientific sense, and then obviously getting the people who within the community who are also like more tend to be like atheistic, I call them more assimilated, or like just joined in with the regular society, that aren't open to like the whole spiritualistic terms, because there are.
Well, I'm not worried about them per se. We can talk. That would be, I could talk to them about what fits with their traditions and worldview is what I would take into account for them.
Jeremy, you're referring to people who are they're not working with medicine in a spiritual context. They're not in a tightly held space. Like you're talking about the burner scene.
Yeah, more or less, or people who are influenced by the burner scene and that are kind of in that in between space. Like, and they want to go because they don't trust like big pharma. Like the question was trying to hit like all the different low levels and scopes of the panel. Like in terms of how
I think, I appreciate Dr. Jeremy's like specific ritualistic prescriptions, and there are ones that I am into, but I don't think that's as relevant as saying the rules number 1 and 2 of any psychedelic use is set and setting. And that is why it's recommended that you drink ayahuasca with a practitioner, medicine person who can hold a space for you and keep an eye out for things. And I think that goes beyond ayahuasca. And I think that anyone who wants to work with psychedelics in a way that's actually going to give them a profound experience of healing, of whether it's spiritual connection, whether it's healing childhood, anything, should have a find a spot, do it with an intention. I always tell people, even if you're not like in a ceremony, do your journaling beforehand, prepare your body beforehand, take it with intention. I mean, I imagine, because I was in the burner scene for a while, people know that. They just choose not to do that. And even in the, let's say, like, if I'm going to talk about like neo-Hasidic hippies who go out camping and say, oh, I'm going to, take this or take that. Sure, you can take anything in a semi-held but not fully controlled space, and a lot of things can happen. And I guess one of the challenges of education at this time that we're in, where psychedelics are becoming more and more popular, so more and more people see it as accessible, but they don't actually necessarily treat them with the gravitas that they deserve. I was just thinking to myself today, actually, about, because I'm sort of on a bit of a break right now, and I have access to several medicines, and I was like, oh, it's Shabbat, I'm by myself. And I was like, no, like, it's not time. And then I thought, wow, what's the, how long has it taken me to learn that sense of like, light the candles, say the Psalms, do the journaling, whatever it is. Yeah, I like to say the journey for travelers, by the way, the prayer for travelers. It's Tfilat HaDerech, it's a convenient thing. But again, whether or not people are into Judaism or not, every tradition has mechanisms that you can work with. And the question is just, are people taking it seriously enough that they're prepared to do those things? Or are they like, it's cool, I can dance around the playa with, all of this in my system, and be prepared to pick up whatever kind of excess hits you on the way.
That makes sense. It's you can't control an individual's actions, and you just hope that they're responsible enough and take the proper precautions and are educated enough to know that they might fall. They have a higher risk of falling off the cliff if they're out in the middle of the woods or drowning.
All right. Any other questions before we move on to Dr. Jeremy's presentation? For our panelists. I want to thank everyone. I know not everyone, Benny needs to leave, and I know that not everyone can stay, but just really appreciating the dialogue. And our next one, Natalie Ginsburg, couldn't make it to this one, but she plans to make it to the next one in June. And also Dr. Z, and anyone's welcome to Google him, but Dr. Z has been featured on the BBC and The Guardian. He's a little bit of a renegade out there, and he basically creates psychedelic drugs in his lab. So he's a very interesting character. And then, of course, we will welcome back participants from this panel as well if they're interested and want to come back, because I've really felt positive about this dialogue. Thank you. So Dr. Weiss, you have the option to share your screen and start your presentation.
Okay. Great. Hello, it's Dr. Jeremy from Temple of Miriam the Prophetess. And welcome to Secrets of the Ancient Hebrew Incense Makers. In this lecture, we'll first have a brief introduction, then we'll go right into a review of how to make your own incense, and we're going to talk about making trails and cones and coils, all those little things. We're going to move on to classic incense ingredients of antiquity. We will then review techniques of besmoking or suffumigation. We'll discuss petitions or kvittles and their relationship to incense. And then we're going to conclude with a series of spells that use incense. The first one is incense to erase one's enemies. We have a spell to find your soulmate. We will review a spell using incense for heartache, depression, or sadness, and incense for prophetic dreaming,
as well as incense to strengthen a marriage, incense for influence, stay with me incense ritual, incense for defense against bewitchment. And of course, as we conclude, we will discuss briefly incense for exorcism. So now let's proceed with our introduction. Incense has innumerable theurgic functions, such as promoting healing, providing protection, blessings. It can be aphrodisiac in quality. It can be used for exorcism, to enhance fertility, and on and on and on and on. And just one example is the theurgic act of smelling certain spices used in the weekly Sabbath ceremony called the Havdalah ceremony. That's just one example. The purpose is of smelling the spices is to comfort our soul, which is saddened by the departure of an additional soul that is received on the Sabbath. In the Jewish tradition, incense in the temple functioned as a mimetic rendering of the clouds that covered Mount Sinai, where God was revealed. It also helped to shield the high priest from being blinded by God's glory. The original formula used in making ketoret, or the incense offering used at the temple, was a carefully guarded secret that was known only to the compounders of the house of Abtanas. And they were charged with producing this incense offering. According to the Talmud, the formula for the ketoret was given to the Jewish people by the angel of death. The ingredients and proportions of this blend were kept hidden so as to prevent its replication for the purpose of worshiping other gods for secular use. After the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, any attempt to duplicate the temple ketoret formula for the incense was absolutely forbidden by the rabbis. Absolutely forbidden. And there have been various conflicting opinions and speculations about the true ingredients of this formula and the right proportions all throughout classical Jewish literature. Lots of speculations. Recently, some scientific research has been performed, and some of this incense has been discovered, and retroactive analysis is now technologically possible. And I have included that link in your PDF so that you can read the exact formula for the ketoret incense, but maybe you shouldn't be making it. Now, in the Talmud, the proper techniques for the burning of incense are detailed in Yoma 47a, that's a section of the Talmud, Yoma 53a, and Tamid 6.3, I think, yes. The proper method for creating an incense altar is written in the Bible. And that's Exodus 30, chapters 1 through 10, I think, verses 1 through 10. Exodus chapter 30, verses 1 through 10. And the wood to make the incense altar is acacia wood. This is interesting on two levels. One is that acacia imparts its own odor to the incense. The other is in your handout. But don't worry, we'll review it when we cover the classic ingredients for incense during antiquity. So let's begin with how to make your own incense. Anything that produces a smell as it burns qualifies as incense, and therefore incense comes in many forms. It could simply be burning a fragrant mixture, which may include wood, herbs, resins, flowers, or whatever else. Sometimes incense is burned as a loose powder. Sometimes it's molded into a stick or formed into a cone. Some incense does not burn very well on its own and needs to be placed on a piece of lit charcoal that has been treated to burn more easily. Other incenses are, quote, self-lighting, unquote. While they don't combust spontaneously at their own free will, they will continue to burn on their own once they are lit. After you choose your various ingredients for your particular incense, then you may want to go ahead and either bless or curse the incense or use a protective psalm, depending on the purpose of the incense. Next, you're going to want to grind your incense into a fine powder. Something like this is acceptable. Something like this is acceptable. But this is not acceptable. This has to be ground completely. It needs to resemble a fine powder. So you can go ahead and use either a mortar and pestle or a coffee grinder, but whatever you do, the incense mixture ultimately needs to be a very fine powder. At this point, you have incense. You could throw it into a fire. You could add a little bit of essential oils to it. You could burn it on hot coals. If you pour it out into a little thin trail about 4 centimeters long and a half centimeter wide and light one end on fire, if it burns on its own, then you have incense and you're good to go with an incense trail. But most incense isn't that burnable on its own and will require a burning agent and or a binder if you want to make various shapes. Some people choose to use 80% fine sawdust. I prefer to use the ground bark of the laurel tree, which can be purchased under its name that is known in Japanese called tabu no ki. It's an odorless ground bark. It's used as both a burning agent and a binding agent because when it gets wet, it becomes moldable and then can be dried in that shape. All the fine details are included in your PDF. Next, you're going to add either holy water or water from the well of Miriam or Mayim Chaim, which is living water, or water that has never seen the sun, into the mix along with essential oils and make a moldable dough. You're going to add just enough to make a moldable dough. If you add too much, then you're going to have to add a little bit more tabu no ki, and if it's too dry, then you'll have to add a little bit more water. You want it to be not slimy, but a nice dough, a nice moldable dough that doesn't break apart or fracture. The aroma can be fine-tuned by adding more or less of a particular ingredient, but you're always going to want to keep the consistency back to a moldable dough. So if you add enough oil, you're going to have to balance it out with the proper amount of tabu no ki. If you add too much or too little water, all of those things need to be balanced, and that is achieved through trial and error. In Jewish mysticism, there are the female waters, as well as the male waters, the well of Miriam, Mayim Chaim, like I said, living water and water that has never seen the sun. All of these have different magical purposes and can be chosen in order to achieve specific ends. And now that we've made this into a nice moldable dough, it's a little bit dry, but for the purposes of this demonstration, no, actually, I think it's going to work just fine. Great, that's great. Okay, it should be like this. Now I'm going to pinch off a piece and roll it into a cone. Just shape it into a cone shape, just like this. Ooh, there you go. Oh, that's perfect. That's really nice. There should be no cracks or fissures. There we go. We'll just set it down. Look at that. You can see it's a nice cone shape all around. Just like that. It should be no wider than a pencil eraser at the base. Okay. And now I'm going to show you how to make a stick. So you just take the piece and roll it between your hands and continue to roll it. Pretty much the thinner, the better. This is kind of a thick piece. Then you're going to use what's called a blank, and you're going to insert a blank into the end. And your incense should just be a little bit wider than the blank. This is a little thick. I should probably continue to kind of roll it and spin it down. Now, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Oh, it's a little bit. Now you'll see since it's doughy, it's kind of floppy. And it doesn't really want to adhere to the blank very well. And now, since I'm pinching it and moving it, and it's very floppy, how am I going to get it to dry straight? Well, I have a unique little system. What you do is you grab the end and hold it upside down, and you can do these with an entire stack, actually. You just put them all together, bind them all together, and then let them dry, and you'll get a nice, long, straight piece. Since the dough is shapeable, you can make any shape. You can make coils. You don't have to use a stick. You can put it through an extruder and make interesting stars. You can do whatever you like. Then you need to let it set out and dry for about 1 to 5 days, depending on the temperature, the barometric pressure, the climate in your household. Again, I've included many more details in your PDF, but now you know the basics of how to make incense, sticks, and cones, and loose incense. Now let's move on to some of the classic incense ingredients of antiquity. The first is acacia. The burning bush was acacia, and acacia wood is the same wood used to build Noah's Ark, the tabernacle, and the holy altar. Jews sometimes plant a sprig of acacia to mark a grave of a departed friend or loved one. In some magical traditions, such as hoodoo, acacia is sometimes used to contact or venerate the dead. Acacia leaves are dipped in holy water and sprinkled on an altar, or acacia is burned as incense itself in order to communicate with or memorialize the dead. Acacia is also used to open the mind divisions. Acacia leaves are burned on charcoal to induce spiritual phenomenon and develop personal psychic power. Adding frankincense and myrrh is said to intensify the effect. Given all of that, it does not surprise me at all that the entheogenic hallucinogen known as DMT was successfully extracted from acacia maideni in 1992 and subsequently also extracted from acacia obscufolia. Besamim spices. The word besamim literally translates to spices, and is a variant of the Hebrew word for fragrant, or besem. This word is also used as an adjective to describe particular plants, such as cinnamon and cane. However, the term has become synonymous for the spices used to celebrate a weekly ritual called Havdalah. Usually, the besame mixture is a proprietary blend of spices. Much like different families in India have different formulations for garam masala, many different Jewish families have varying recipes, and they generally include things like allspice, bay, cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, eucalyptus, mint, myrtle, orange peel, pine, rosebuds, rosemary, and other aromatic ingredients. These spices are not usually burned, but used as a potpourri. This mixture made its way into hoodoo as money herbs. Cassia and cinnamon are a pair of very interesting incense ingredients. Cinnamon and cassia are two different species of the same Cinnamomum genus, but are still two different and distinct products, and they are treated as such in the Bible and in the Talmud. Each are listed individually in the 5-ingredient formula for the holy anointing oil given in Exodus chapter 30, verses 22 through 25. The 5 ingredients are olive oil, myrrh, fragrant cinnamon, cassia, and fragrant cane. Abraham von Worms, author of the Book of Abramelin, treats them as the same, and this mistake has been propagated by researchers and occultists such as Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers and Aleister Crowley. So what is fragrant cane? Well, besem means fragrant and kana means cane, and this plant has sometimes been translated to mean calamus. It was erroneously translated by Mathers as galangal, a mistake that was also propagated by Aleister Crowley. There is much debate about the identity of this fragrant cane. It is of note that in the Hebrew, the word cinnamon is the origin of the Greek word cinnamonimon, the Latin word for cinnamonimum, and the English word for cinnamon. Therefore, just as the Hebrew word for cinnamon is the origin of cinnamon, some linguistic and botanical scholars believe that it is possible that cannabisum is the origin of the word for cannabis. The fact that cannabis and hemp, a form of cannabis, are indigenous to the Levant region and have been used continuously for food, medicine, and clothing for thousands of years supports this possibility. Additionally, in the 1960s, about 30 miles west of the Dead Sea, archaeologists discovered an ancient shrine at Tel Arad, near Jerusalem, and it dated between 1000 and 600 BCE. At the time, residue on the altar showed that animal fat, dung, and frankincense were burnt on the altar, but analysis of the dark material on the altar proved inconclusive. In 2020, scientists using a newer technology were able to successfully analyze the dark material. It was found to be cannabis with enough THC content to induce an altered state of consciousness by breathing in its fumes. Next up, frankincense. This is a resin extracted from the Boswellia thurifera bush found in Arabia, Somalia, and India. It has psychotropic properties. According to the Talmud, frankincense is used in wine to numb the senses of a person being led to execution. Frankincense was sometimes soaked with jasmine roses. In hoodoo, frankincense is used to intensify the spiritual work being performed. It can be used in rituals of necromancy when used in conjunction with a black candle, black salt, black arts oil, and a glass of water. Next up, the heart and liver of a fish. In the Book of Tobit, the angel Raphael tells Tobias that this is the formula to use in order to drive out the demon Asmodeus. No discussion of incense from antiquity would be complete without myrrh. Myrrh is one of the most valued scents. Abraham is symbolically identified with myrrh in the Song of Songs Rabbah. Myrrh is also equated to the Kabbalist sephirot called Chesed, which represents divine love. Myrrh stimulates peacefulness, relaxation, and sensual love. It also has opiate-like qualities. Let's move on to besmoking and suffumigation. Now, I take a regular glass jar, and if I wanted to infuse, say, a liquid for consumption with an idea, I could use the very same thing. But here I'm going to infuse amulets. So I'm not going to put liquid in. I just put the amulets into the glass, a little smoker device, and some incense. And I pour a little bit of the incense in there. And let's say this is psychic vision incense, or maybe this is a protective incense because I want the amulets to be protective, or let's say I'm making a love potion. I could put the petition of the person right here with their name on it, and then the last thing you need is a torch. So no problem. You take a torch, you have that, and you point it down in the smoker, and you can see the smoke now infusing on the amulets. There you go. And I can let it sit there until the smoke clears for as long as I like. And voila, now you know how to besmoke objects and potions. Quittles are petitions that are sometimes burned, either with or without incense. And they're burned in order to carry your petition up to God or other intercessors in the celestial realm, like angels, ancestors, prophets, righteous and pious people called tzaddiks. The petition is burned by placing it on a charcoal briquette, which is also used to burn loose incense. You can place some Ketoret incense on top of your petition, then light the briquette and burn the petition and incense together. I'm going to conclude this workshop by giving you a series of spells that use incense and that you can use on your own. The first spell is a spell or curse to erase your enemy. Not just your enemy, but every memory ever held of your enemy. Not just held by you, but held by anyone. This person shall be completely forgotten to time and history and completely erased. Now, such a powerful spell one would think would be forbidden in the Jewish tradition, but in fact, Jews are commanded to curse the Amalekites, which are the intrinsic enemy of the Jewish people, always seeking to harm and kill them. Make up an incense dough using the appropriate cursing herbs and your enemy's personal concerns, nail clippings, hair, sweat, blood, whatever. And rather than using water, consider using urine, like a freezer spell. You then form your incense dough into a thin disc about the size of a coin. Now, using a thin metal stylus, such as a needle, you're going to write the person's name followed by child of, and then their mother's first name in the dough. And you will follow this with this particular sigil. Now, this sigil is the Hebrew curse called the Yemach Shemo V'Zikro, and it means, may their name and every memory of them be erased. It's often abbreviated YS. You then allow your incense to dry, and then, when you're ready, you can light the incense while repeating the words, as this incense turns to ash, may so-and-so's name and memory turn to ash. You can just toss the disc into a fire if you like, or you can set it on a hot coal. The second spell I'd like to teach you is how to find your soulmate using incense. You'll need a spice box, and this is a traditional Bessemer spice holder. You don't need to go traditional. You could use any type of box, a cigar box if you like, but something to keep your incense in. You'll also need 2 candles and a pair of candle holders. Now you're going to prepare a blend of spices according to the qualities that you desire in a soulmate. So you could select the appropriate incense herbs that are used to maximize these particular qualities. Don't use any ingredients to which you might be allergic, okay? That makes sense. But for instance, yarrow nettle, you might use yarrow nettle for someone if you're looking for someone who's brave or courageous. You might choose rose petals for if you want your partner to be romantic. You might use Bessemer spices for a prosperous mate, or if you want someone of high morals and good character, maybe you'll add frankincense and myrrh into your mixture. Now, you'll know that, if you want a relaxed partner, vandal root would be good. You want a focused partner, caffeine would be good, right? Coffee. But you notice that some smells don't go together, just like some personality qualities. So you're going to have to find the appropriate blend. I mean, you're really not going to find someone who's both low-key and chill and focused and driven all at the same time. Those two scents kind of just don't go together. There's also other ways to add to your mixture. Now, not just the incense, you can add various oils, like if you want an intelligent person, maybe King Solomon oil. That's another way of adding to your incense mixture. There's another way. You can even also say certain biblical verses and certain psalms. You can bless the herb mixture by using certain psalms. You know that using psalmic magic, certain psalms carry certain qualities and desires as well. As do certain biblical verses. So you can also incorporate that into your spice mixture. Now, once you have the mixture that's formulated to your desires, okay, you'll place it into the spice box, either the Bessemer holder or whatever you've chosen to be your spice box, and you'll set that aside with the 2 white candles until the time is right. And Talmud teaches us that at every Sabbath, we get a second soul. We get a second soul, and therefore this ritual should be done on Friday night after the sun goes down and there are more than 3 stars in the sky. You bring out your spice box and your candles with the candle holders, and Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 tells us that the soul enters and leaves through the nose, So while contemplating the qualities that you've desired, that you've chosen your soulmate to have, you're going to essentially breathe these qualities along with your second soul that's given to you during this very special time into your body. And you'll place each empty candle holder on your candle safe altar about a foot apart, okay? About a foot apart. Now, between them, now you can say the magic words once you've got them, set there. You can take out, and you've got your spices next to you, okay? You then can say the magic words, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei besamim, okay? Then you open the box and you breathe in the aroma until you're refreshed, until you feel that soul enter your body. And then you take some of the loose potpourri in the spice box, and between the 2 candles, there's a sigil that you're gonna write with the incense. This is in your handout, okay? The sigil is the Hebrew word for bashert. Bashert means your perfect fit, your destiny, your preordained mate, your soulmate. And you're going to continue as you write your bashert to breathe in your soulmate and attract your soulmate, all of those qualities that you want. And the candle flames on either sides, those flames themselves represent 2 souls. So you're going to light the candles after you put the sigil. You're going to light the 2 candles in another really special way. You're going to take them out of the candle holders, and then you're going to place them together in one hand, okay? And then with one hand, you're gonna light them, and with your helper candle or with your match, and you'll say the following magic words: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei. You ready? Borei menorei ha'eish. Eish is fire. Okay, and then you can set them back down into the candle holders, and you can scry using your fingernails, and you may see the face of your mate reflected in your fingernails from the glow of the candlelight. That's a very traditional. That is a very traditional method of scrying to find your soulmate. So then when the candles extinguish themselves, you just let them burn normally, and when they extinguish themselves, you can sweep the herbs and everything into a pile, and you can burn them in a fire or on a charcoal briquette, and you should continue to modify and change your mixture, because what you want today is not always. You might realize that maybe something else is a little bit more important. That you want. You realize that you want someone with a little bit more financial stability or something. So you're going to add that into the mixture a little bit more of that, so you'll change your mixture a little bit as time goes by, and when performed regularly, I think you'll find this ritual particularly helpful to manifest your desired soulmate.
What about incense for heartache, depression, and sadness? Well, this is addressed in the Book of Abramelin.
Well, according to the Book of Abramelin, incense can be used to cure heartache, depression, and sadness as follows. First, take a glass bowl, and using incense, you're going to write on the inside of the bowl. And the words that you're going to write are as follows. The eyes of Adonai see you. Okay? So it is in life. He makes for a contented heart and for a happy face. He protects from sickness, problems, and unhappiness. Okay? Then you're going to take this bowl with the writing in it, and you're going to besmoke it using incense of Abramelin, which is myrrh, fragrant cinnamon, cassia, and fragrant cane. And then spill some wine over it. It says cover it in the sign of Mars. Yeah, spill some wine in there, or some mead, and then cover it in the sign of Mars. Then you're going to drink from this bowl every evening for 7 nights, and your heartache, depression, and sadness should go away. For those of you who wish to use incense to induce oniromantic or prophetic dreaming, or to have their questions answered during a dream, you can turn to no better resource than Sefer HaRazim, which is the book of occult secrets and mysteries, essentially. And according to Sefer HaRazim, in order to induce a prophetic state, you should essentially go to the seashore. I was going to say stand, but you go to the seashore or a riverbank on a Sunday during the third hour of the night, and there you should wear a new cloak, and you should begin a vegetarian diet, according to Sefer HaRazim, and you should abstain from wine, and take with you pure frankincense and myrrh, and place them on burning coals in a new clay vessel. Then turn your face towards the water, the water, and say the name of the overseer of the 7th encampment, along with the names of each of the angels within that encampment, okay? And you repeat the names of those angels again and again, a total of 3 times, and a pillar of fire between heaven and earth shall appear. Now, you say the following words. I adjure you.
So Jeremy, I'm not sure what to do about the sound. Can folks hear me? So Jeremy, I'm not sure if the sound stopped recording.
I can hear you, but I couldn't hear Jeremy.
I know the sound got cut off. That's strange. So I had a question, Jeremy, before we end, and it had to do with Jewish mysticism and witchcraft, and kind of tied back into Jeremy's question. Jeremy's question, I think, related more with the idea that when people undergo psychedelic experiences, that they can somehow open up like a portal and have like an evil entity, like a demon, enter into them. And I heard a lot of response to that in regards to like you know, making sure that set and setting is happening and so forth. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts, Jeremy, on Jeremy's question in regards to when people are in a psychedelic state. I mean, it sounds like you're saying they can do an incantation or something like that, but to validate that perhaps, because for some people, they don't necessarily believe in demons. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to that for a moment in regards to Judaism and just ancient beliefs around demons and Judaism, because I know that you do demon bowl workshops, but also as it applies to being in a psychedelic experience in a very vulnerable state. And then hopefully, Jeremy, if you're getting all these questions, because I'm not sure since you're not responding, I'm also wondering about if you have any thoughts on ancient Jewish ritual really involving a lot of entheogens and why that might be covered up or not understood like universally. Like I know some of us have read about the articles that an Israeli researcher had really indicated that Moses was having a hallucinogenic experience when he was communicating with Hashem through the burning bush. And that's just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. And if you don't, we can save your thoughts for the next session, which we'll probably do in 2 months with Dr. Z and with Natalie Ginsburg. But why don't I do this? Why don't I call Dr. Jeremy real quick and then just see if I can get him. And if I can't get him back, then we will end here since we're at the 2-hour mark, unless someone had something else to add. Let me just call him real quick. That's rather odd.
Hello.
Hi, so the sound went off for the video recording.
Okay, when?
Like 5 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
If you're still on, I had asked a question before we were ending, and I'm not sure if you're up for answering it or if you.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. The question related to Jeremy's question about what it means to have a psychedelic experience where people may be open to entities like demons, and the idea that demons were part of Jewish culture, and just acknowledging kind of that vulnerability.
Wait, well, do you want me to finish this presentation?
I don't, it seems to be stuck.
Oh, where?
It ended on,
Oh, maybe I got kicked out of the meeting.
oh, maybe you did, but
Okay.
it stopped.
Okay, hold on a second. That's probably my fault. And then I can, blank. Okay, let's try this. Okay, will you let me in?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Wi-Fi. Close. All right. Good. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I got kicked out of the meeting somehow, maybe with crappy Wi-Fi or something like that. You know, I don't know if you'd like me to continue, but I'm happy to continue or stop here and answer questions.
So it was frozen for a minute there, and we're about at the tail end. So I'm okay with ending things. I just was hoping that you could comment on when Jeremy was sharing earlier, he was talking about when people are in a vulnerable state due to psychedelics. I know the woman that he's speaking of, and he felt like she had like a demonic possession occur.
Yeah.
And after her psychedelic experience, she went on to feel like she developed multiple personality disorder, and her life kind of went in the shitter. And so I think what he was trying to get at was the concept that demons or something like that might be able to go into people's psyches and things like that. And I felt like it was very profound for me how people responded. They talked about set and setting. They talked about the impact of what we are bringing back to our communities. And for some people, they don't have communities. And so that can lend itself to a mental health crisis. But I was hoping for a second that you could speak about the history of kind of like a belief in demonic aspects of existence or things of that nature within Judaism, because as you may well know, there are some Jews that don't perceive of entities like that or don't believe they exist. And so I think it would be hard, they might classify that as something else and use other language.
Yeah, that's okay. So whatever you want to call it, demon, psychic demon, a negative intrusive thought, whatever word you want to call it, you can call it malevolent entity. Okay. Some people call it a spirit. I mean, like, we know what we're talking about here. So scary things, letting in scary malevolent entities. And Jews have had historically methods of self-preparation so that didn't happen. Because during things like a Heiner Plet, you can have problems.
Okay. And then as far as why are we not hearing about the entheogenic qualities of like the ancient mysticism of the Jewish culture and the Jewish faith in mainstream, culture, other than, I mean, I've seen articles from the Israeli researchers that have pointed to acacia wood and said that Moses was having a hallucinogenic experience and so forth, but you don't hear, like you're talking about myrrh, you're talking about these other substances, frankincense and so forth, and cannabis in the temple.
Well, you're just not reading the articles I'm reading.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else that has any questions on Dr. Jeremy Weiss's presentation before we end for today? And we're going to be back on in June, I think.
If anybody wants, they can email me, and I'm happy to send them the PDF, which includes all the citations and everything like that for that presentation. It includes all the spells, everything.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. They just have to just let them know to email me and say, hey, I was at the blah, 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 and I'll take it.
Like your cousin Aaron wants to do this again with Dr. Z, who's kind of this crazy zany guy who we're going to have on for the next one. So I really appreciate everyone. Okay. Well, have a good night and bless everyone. Oh, this lady would like to know, including the missing part of the presentation.
Well,
I'm happy to let it roll for the rest. I need to cook dinner, but I'm happy to let it roll. So do you want to start it where it was?
I can do that.
Okay. Do you mind reminding us exactly where it was? I'm trying to think.
I know where it was.
Okay.
Okay. Let me.
You know why it lost volume?
I'll just roll it back 5 minutes.
Okay.
How's that?
Sounds good.
Let's see.
So we're gonna end here and then exit with the rest of this.
Okay. Was it there?
Yeah, you had done the love spell for creating the relationship that you want.
So, all right. So there looks like there's about 7 minutes left.
Okay, go ahead and play it and we'll end with that.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Now, then I'm gonna finally conclude with a little bit of essential incense advice, a small piece of essential incense advice. But first, let's get to the first of the last of the 4 spells that we're gonna discuss, and that is using incense to strengthen a marriage. For a faithful marriage, as the father walks alongside the bride to the groom, the father is instructed to burn incense of Abramelin and say the following: the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob are with you and will help each of you in all ways. And that is how to strengthen a marriage. The second spell is using incense for influence, to influence something or someone. Fast for 3 days and besmoke yourself with incense of Abramelin. Then, to gain favor from an important person, write the following. Okay? Let every person borrow of it from their neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, but Adonai will give the people favor in the sight of their eyes. And you write that in wax, and then you besmoke it, and then you hang it under your shirt and over your chest. It's an amulet that has been besmoked in incense. The third spell that I would like to share with you is a stay with me ritual or stay with me spell. To ensure a man will love his wife, and that's how it's written, the wife should take an incense burner and place 7 newly lit coals in it before sunrise. Put the burner under a fruiting apple tree, apples, fertility, and love, and spread incense of Abramelin on it before and go to running water and wash your face and hands. Okay. Write the following words with a gold or copper stylus in pure beeswax. I'm assuming it's copper Venus as an association. The words to write are: like an apple tree between wild trees, so is my friend among the young men. And throw it on the coals, and when it has burned away, pick the nicest apple that has been well smoked and give it to the gentleman, the man, to eat. Alternatively, if the apples are not ready, do the same with flowers or blossoms and give it to the man to smell. And the same procedure can be used to ensure a wife will love a man with a few changes, or whoever will love someone else with a few changes. Rather than an apple tree, a man should write on wax, as the rose is among the thorns, as a rose is among the thorns, so is my friend among the daughters. And you place that on, you write that on the amulet, and you place that under a rose bush. And then you pick off 3 roses and you give them to the woman to smell. And that's from the book of Abramelin, okay? So that's the stay with me. Now, we're going to conclude with incense for defense, and then the last and most important tip. Incense for defense. To counter against bewitchment, on the day before Sabbath, take some running water that has not been exposed to the sun and throw in incense of Abramelin while incanting the following words 7 times. An embittered person tries to damage but a fierce angel will overcome him. Then add 7 drops of olive oil and let this stand until night. Then wash your feet, and it will turn the curse back onto the originator of the hex. Huh? That's a good one, right? That's a good one. Okay, the final tip is that burning incense for a demon's benefit, as an offering, is absolutely forbidden in the Bible, in the Torah. It's an absolutely forbidden. But burning incense to exorcise a demon or malevolent spirit has been and continues to be the cornerstone technique of exorcism.
Well, in the amount of time that we've had together, I think we've covered a tremendous amount about incense and how to use it. And I hope I have put you on your way, on the path to making your own incense. And I look forward to the wonderful smells that you begin to produce. Many blessings to you.
All right, thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.